I'm going to give people a couple seconds to jump in here. TCU's 3-1. They lost to Arizona State 27-24 tonight. They were up. Uh, my hair's a mess. Whatever. Game sucked. It fits with the theme. They're up 17-0 in the second quarter, and quickly the defense gave up a touchdown to Tyson, 17-7, 17-14 at half. But the defense, honestly, tonight, I felt like they did what they could. They stood on their head. They made stop after stop, had multiple stops in the red zone, and late in the ball game, Arizona State finally broke through, scored a touchdown to tie that game up at 24. And then a few plays later, Hoover gets strip sacked, and Devil Frog says, bad penalty. Yeah, that horse collar penalty was horrible, but there's nobody to blame tonight but yourself. The horse collar penalty was bad. It should have been offensive face mask. And I realize that could have changed things because the Arizona State kicker was struggling. You blew a 17-0 lead. TCU lost the game. And they lost the game for the same reason they've lost a lot of games over the last 2 years. The O-line's not good enough. It's not. And if you want to be mad at me, that's fine. I said this offseason that I thought they were going to be better. I thought they could run the ball better. Kavorian Barnes was out tonight. Eric McAllister was basically out the entire game. I don't know what's wrong. I'll see if I can get an update in the post-game presser from Sonny. But they made a choice. TCU is. They made a choice this offseason. They did not go after O-linemen in the portal. And there's a reason for that. O-linemen are expensive. Okay. So you're not going to shore up your offensive line. Cade Bennett was coming back from injury. They moved Colton Deary over to center. They had two young tackles in Ryan Hughes and Ben Taylor Whitfield that they believed in. They had a couple guards in Carson Bruno and Remington Strickland they believed in. But they didn't make any major changes. They basically stayed with the core group they had from last year, plugged in new tackles, young guys that have been through the system, and brought in an interior offensive lineman that they had scouted the year before and thought was going to take a step forward. They were bad tonight. Josh was sacked 6 times. He was hurried a lot more than that. I saw Logan say, and I'll try to get to your comments here in a minute. Logan said at the beginning of this, he was bad. Yeah, he was bad tonight. He threw 2 picks. He was staring down wide receivers. Obviously, losing your number one wideout is a big part of that. But he looked rattled. I mean, this is the first time that I can remember Hoover looking really out of sorts and rattled like that since maybe the Utah game on the road last year, where he was sort of seeing ghosts and hurrying up and making throws. He threw 2 picks. He should have thrown about 4 or 5 tonight. He had a slant to DJ Rogers that was over the middle. But here's the thing. Let me get back to my original point. When everybody in the building knows you're throwing the ball, and I'm not making an excuse for Josh. I'm sure he'll look at the film and say that he's got to be better. And the coaching staff will look at it and say he's got to be better too. I would agree with that. But when you can't run the ball and everybody knows that you have to pass, it makes life really difficult on offense. And when things start to melt down and you can't salt away the clock by getting first downs and moving the chains, it makes your life really difficult on offense. And my goodness, I mean, the defense tonight, they did what they could. I get it. 4th and 12, Channing Canada gets a pass interference penalty. And yes, it was pass interference. I mean, the flag was late, but he was early. He was early getting there. He wrapped his arms around, the wide receiver. Ryan says there was a ton of east and west from the running backs as well. Yeah, there's plenty of blame to go around. Look, I'm not just saying it was on the O-line completely. But to me, the problem is, you look at themes. And you start to figure out who a team is and who a program is. Here's what I know about Sonny Dykes since he took the job. Since 2022, which he inherited an offensive line from Gary Patterson. That was good, and that had a veteran unit, and they did a great job. From 2023 on, they have not been physical enough up front to win games against good teams. And it's not just tonight. I mean, tonight was an example of it. But last year in Houston, God bless them, Houston wasn't even a good team last year, but they got dominated by Houston up front. And Willie Fritz said, "Wait, I know you can't run the ball, so I'm going to drop 8 or 9 guys back in coverage and dare you to run the ball." And they couldn't do it. And so they lost that ball game. When they played Baylor last year, and that ended up being a close game, and I know the offense had 34 points, but hear me when I say on both sides of the ball, they were not good enough up front to win the football game. When they played SMU last season, and even you look back at the UCF game, UCF, they take a big lead and they can't salt the game away. They slowly and methodically give that lead up because they can't get first downs and win the ball game. It's all a symptom of an offensive line that is not up to the task and can't do their job against good football teams. And it was the same story tonight against Arizona State. If you take out the sacks from Hoover, you ran the ball for 50 yards on 20 carries, which is, about 2 yards a carry, right? That's not enough. And Josh got sacked all night long, and especially in the second half. That strip sack at the end of the game, and I don't want to single out Ben Taylor Whitfield, but he just gets bullied. It's a bull rush straight back to the quarterback, so much so that he extends his arm out and the ball just gets taken from him. They had this game in the bag and they let it go. And Arizona State's a good team and they're a tough team. I get all that. Your season's not over because you lost tonight. If you told me before the ball game, TCU loses to Arizona State 27-24, I would have said, okay, that's disappointing, but on the road against a good football team, these things happen. In a vacuum, it's not a bad loss. The problem is we're seeing the same issues that we've seen the last few years. And all offseason long, I told you guys, it's going to get better. Well, it didn't tonight. And the first real opportunity where we got to see a chance, if this team could take a step forward and show us that they're different, they didn't answer the bell. Jay Hamilton says, how about TCU covering Tyson in single coverage? Yeah, I mean, he got his tonight. He's a really good wide receiver. And 4th and goal, would I've loved to put a safety over the top? Sure. But I think they had 4 wideouts out there. I mean, they're spreading them out. Like, you're at the 4-yard line. You can't drop 8 or 9 people back in coverage and play zone in that situation. And he beat his man. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the defense tonight. I thought they played good enough to win. I said this last week. I think you have to evaluate teams differently based on their rosters. TCU, it's not that they don't care about defense. I actually think their defense is still pretty solid. But Kev says still no run game 2 years in a row. Yeah, they have built this team with their offense being their strength. I mean, right or wrong, Sonny's he's an offensive mind. He brought in Kendall Browse a few years ago to try to really push this thing to the next level. They got a quarterback they like. They've invested in that. They went in the portal and got wide receivers. They've tried to build this thing around the offense and around their quarterback. So when your offense, that's supposed to be the strength of your team, scores 7 points in the second half and can't put together, couldn't even get a first down in crunch time. Like, game on the line, tied at 24. Josh just completely misses man jack over the middle. Would have been a first down if he hits him on the throw. Then a play later, he gets sacked and fumbles a football. John Martin says you can't run north and south when you're in the backfield. I mean, somebody else brought that up. Yeah, the running backs share some blame in this. They weren't putting their foot in the ground and getting north and south. But to me, it's a symptom of the problem. And again, you want to talk about running backs. I mean, it's hard to say this definitively because if Kavorian Barnes was healthy, maybe it's a different story. But they didn't go after a running back this offseason. Right? I mean, they got Barnes. But they stuck with Payne and they stuck with Battle. And I think Trent Battle's a good football player. I don't even really want to bring him up in that discussion. But they stuck with the guys they had. And they just completely melted down in the fourth quarter. I mean, in every facet of the game. Defense tried to hold up the best they could, but as Devil Frog said, they were on the field all night long. They were on the field all night long. And finally, Arizona State was able to break through late in the ball game, score a touchdown, and the offense immediately turns it over. Defense got some big stops when they're up 24-17. You know, that missed field goal was a huge momentum turner. Go score. You're backed up at your own 3-yard line. I understand it's tough, but at least get a first down. But they were so bad at running the ball. They couldn't do anything with it. DB Productions asked, why did Denman take the ball out? Yeah, that was a bad decision. Freshman mistake. And it's one of those things, if you're going to take the ball out, the worst part about it was he hesitated. Like, if you're going to take that, you got to make a decision as that ball's in the air. If you're going to take it out of the end zone, come out with a full head of steam. Instead, he sort of got caught in no man's land, and then he had to come out of the end zone. And that was another example of just bad decisions in crunch time. CB says the offense being that disappointing is concerning in their first really big game. Yes, it is. It is. And, you know, again, missing some personnel pieces, but it's hard to get away from the idea of you got to be able to do better up front. John says the play calling was awful, but you can't blame Browse when the O-line can't block anymore. Anyone? Okay, let me say this about KB. I think he's a very inventive play caller. I think he does some good things. I feel like he builds a good game plan. At a certain point, not being able to run the ball has to be on him too. Like, it's on the head coach. It's obviously on the offensive line coach, AJ Ricker. But this is year 3, and the same thing's happening. And I know your OC is not necessarily totally in charge of personnel, but you haven't been able to figure out this part of the ball game. And that's super disappointing. And it's not the first time that's gone down like that. And it's also not the first time you've blown a big lead. You know, some people linked it to the UCF game, and I get that comparison, and just in the simple fact that you let a lead get salted away. But to me, it was a completely different ball game. It wasn't a shootout that turned into sort of a slugfest late. It was kind of a slugfest all night long, and TCU just couldn't execute. To me, it felt like the Utah game last year, except against Utah, you escaped with a win because their quarterback situation was so bad that the TCU defense was able to hold on. But here tonight, it didn't happen that way. Someone says, I think this will be a turning point for TCU. They bounce back. I'm not ready to give up on a close loss to a very solid ASU team. I'm not ready to give up either. I mean, I'm super disappointed. Let me know what you guys think. This is the most, I'm kind of being a prisoner of the moment here. I'm not really mad tonight. I'm kind of just numb. But I don't think the season's over or anything like that. It's just a killer that you had the game in your grasp and you couldn't get it done. And I'm also curious now about, like, how long is Eric McAllister out? Because as many of you pointed out, this offense looked very, very different when he wasn't on the field. Caleb mentioned him being injured really complicated the passing game since they hadn't to worry about double teaming them and they could lock down other players. Yeah, I mean, Jordan Dwyer had a tough night. You know, there were times late when I'm watching that and you see Ed Small in the field, and I really like Ed Small, but Ed Small's out there. Ezukama's out there. He's a young guy. Dwyer's out there. And then there were times where Dwyer's off the field and you're like, who's getting open here? Ed Small had a big catch on like a 3rd and 5, 3rd and 3. But yeah, it complicates your passing game a lot. Caleb says we can't run the ball without Barnes. He needs to recover quickly. Yeah, he needs to recover quickly for sure. But again, if you don't get pushed, like Barnes would have helped tonight. He would have gotten us some tough yards. But if you can't get a push up front, like there's no magical running back that's going to completely change this thing. I'm not saying running backs aren't exempt from this situation completely. I'm just telling you the bigger issue here is the offensive line in my mind. The UCF loss was tough last year, right? Like I level with you guys on that. The Houston loss was tough last year, but honestly, those losses in my mind, it sort of felt like it told you who that team was, and that there were issues with this team that you couldn't really with that team that you couldn't really fix. The reason that I'm so mad tonight or disappointed tonight, you had the game, and I think Arizona State is a pretty solid team, and you just couldn't hold on and find a way to win. It it just wasn't good enough. J.E. Hamilton says you can't fix that O line. I mean, it didn't look good tonight. I'm not ready to completely say you can't fix it, but they certainly didn't look the part this evening. And you look at the teams that you're going to play later on in the schedule. You got to go on the road to BYU. If you're not physically up to the task in that ball game, good luck. Yeah, they're good against weaker competition. That's the thing. This team is flawed right now, and they can beat bad teams. Like they're going to be teams on TCU schedule that they just have better athletes. TCU does, and they're going to win. And the passing game is enough. Iowa State's a physical team. Yes, you're totally right. I'm not looking at the schedule currently, but I know there's BYU, Iowa State. I mean, even like West Virginia on the road later on in the season. Rich Rod, they've got a pretty good defense. Like there's games that are upcoming that you can't get away with playing like this. Caleb says Colorado's bad, K-State's bad, Baylor has no defense. I mean, I would love to agree with you on all those things, but I don't know. The way they played tonight, I think Colorado should be a win. I think Baylor's getting better. They're getting healthier on defense. There's some real problems here. You got to be able to run the football. You can't play like you did this evening. Got doubled up in total yards, but our red zone defense was salty. Yeah, they played well. I mean, Caleb Larmzor, Max Carroll, the Deal brothers. I thought they did their job up defensively. Had some breakdowns in the first half, but they handled their business. Had a huge fourth down stop, had a third down stop that led to a missed kick. And in both those instances, the offense could have taken the ball, gone down and scored, and essentially ended the ball game. But they couldn't do it. And they kept giving Arizona State chances, giving them opportunities over and over and over again. And eventually they got burned. They lost the ball game. Let me see if there's any post-game quotes. TCU loses 27-24 tonight. They're up 17-0. It's a ball game they should have won. They just couldn't close out. Josh Hoover says there were a lot of missed opportunities on offense. Yeah, there were. I don't think Sonny's been to the podium. Oh, no, he has. Okay. Sonny says he felt like the game came down to the 3 turnovers TCU had. Arizona State won the turnover battle 3-1. He said he was frustrated with the late pass interference call. He said McAllister was limited on practice on Friday. Or he must have meant Thursday. He thought he could play, but he was obviously limited. TCU kept shooting themselves in the foot after going up 17-0. Yep, all those things are true. Somebody asked me if I thought they won the game, if I thought they would win the game with Barnes and McAllister tonight. Yeah, probably so. But Connor says if we had Barnes win this game easily, 12 yards rushing leads to play action being irrelevant. Yeah, because the Arizona State's pinning their ears back and rushing the passer. But here's the problem: they couldn't block tonight. Like I don't. The running backs are an issue, but I didn't come away from watching this ball game, or you know, I didn't come away with this thought of like our running back room is horrible. You obviously miss Kavorian Barnes, but the problem is up front. They can't block people. They can't move people along the offensive line. That's the issue. That's not going to get magically fixed with Barnes coming back. He brings some physicality to the run game that I like. I think he would have broken some tackles tonight. Yes, probably would have turned some loss of yardage into 2 or 3 yards at times. That stuff makes a difference, but it doesn't get to the root issue, which is that when you had to block tonight, you couldn't do it. And that was in the run game and the pass game. As Blake said, they couldn't kill clock at all tonight. And they couldn't put together big drives when they had to put the game away. Colorado next week at home. This team faced some crossroads last year and there were mixed results, but ultimately they got it back on the right track. I might feel differently on Monday. I think right now this is an 8 or 9 win football team, and I don't feel like that's good enough to get you to Arlington. And I hate to say that after one conference game. I understand there's still a lot of football left to be played, but I'm having a hard time coming away with a lot of rosy thoughts after that performance in the second half. Maybe Arizona State's a team of destiny again, and this is just how they're going to win games, by coming back and pulling it out in the end. But they gave you plenty of chances tonight with the missed field goals, the defense with their stops. They gave you opportunities to win, and you couldn't get it done. ASU won't run the table. No, I don't think they will either, but I think Tech could. I mean, there's other teams out there that I feel like can finish with a better record than TCU. And yeah, I'm having a hard time seeing the path, the way that they performed offensively tonight and their O-line. DP Production says we'll beat Tech. They don't play them in the regular season. TCU doesn't play in the regular season. The only way they play them would be in Arlington. And maybe you're trying to make that point. I'm sorry. I'm a little on edge tonight. I'll be back on Monday. This is a tough loss. This is a tough loss, man. I feel for Andy Avalos. I feel for the defense. I think there was a victory to be had there, and TCU just let it get away. And I was hopeful that I could come on tonight and talk about how this team continues to show mental toughness and finds ways to win, but they found a way to lose tonight. It's the Frog Factor Podcast. See you guys Monday. Thanks for joining me on the Late Post Game Show.